partners the fact that the contact hours are very high compared to the UCL curriculum. And we reached together a point that this is needed on application of the modular integrated in Egypt in 2016, and they all acquainted with the healthcare system on the ground, and this was completely new to an Egyptian medical school where students did not get in contact with the healthcare system primarily and did not have placements in the early years. Again, our students visiting NGOs working with different forms of handicapping in modules related to musculoskeletal biology and neurobehavioral science. But always the application part was there. And this actually sensitized us to search in the community of areas where health service delivery is given that we were not oriented about. The vertical module runs all through the academic years, covering ethics, law, professionalism, communication, and many other subjects. Ethics, professionalism, and sexuality topics were challenging areas due to cultural and legal differences between the Egyptian and the British culture. We had to adapt material according to cultural and religious background and to match with the Egyptian law. This was not an easy process. It was difficult. It had to be done gradually and smoothly. Lectures, for example, as confidentiality and abortion were rewritten to be in concordance with the Egyptian law. However, the UK law was also discussed because sometimes they conflicted, and we had to teach the differences that can happen between the different geographical areas and the different backgrounds of people. Egyptian mental health law was totally generated by Rukizeh University, as well as the pattern of healthcare delivery in Egypt. But the issue is that all adaptations and adjustments were in alliance with the program structure, with the intended learning outcomes, and in agreement with our partners to make sure that we don't go to major differences that are not in concordance with the intended learning outcomes. Teaching process again underwent an adaptation. Some lectures were expanded to encompass more knowledge, and this was a real challenge because always faculty tend to add more and more and more, and this was also a debate between me and the staff. The concept of the large and small group work was adopted to encourage more student interaction and engagement. And then the issue of the self-directed learning. This was a real obstacle because this was a completely new concept to everybody. Students couldn't digest the idea and interpreted self-directed learning as free time. We had to do an adaptation here, and the adaptation was to do it as directed self-learning. After discussing with our partners, they said, well, in the first 1 or 2 years, it can be directed self-learning where students are given time for themselves, but assigned specifically to do something, like work on their portfolio, work on their assignments, at their own pace, but with distant supervision. This took 2 years. After that, the self-directed learning was completely student-driven. Introduction of portfolios as a form of as a formative assessment, but a prerequisite for the summative exam, again was a difference in the teaching process from all other medical schools. Assessment again was different, and it needed an adaptation. It was completely new. It was a challenge to both students and staff to shift from essays, oral exams conducted to medical schools into SBAs and more objective structures, OSPE/OSCEs. Staff, we can all, say, yeah, staff, because they are used to essays. They are used to short questions and MCQs, even not SBAs, and they are used to vivas. But what about students? Students had always reflections from their brothers and sisters, from their parents who are physicians, from their cousins and relatives who always said, no, what are you doing? This is not the way. It is much easier, and this is a very difficult school. Training, this necessitated, we received questions from UCL. However, training of staff on writing SBAs and OSPEs was the real thing to ensure the sustainability of the education process and to ensure the same level of the assessment. Changing the system was difficult, required a lot of capacity building and on-the-job training. At the same time, we had to send the first 2 years these questions generated inside NGO to UCL to be corrected, to have feedback, and share this feedback to students. Later on, we only send the exams. OSLER was introduced in the academic year 22-23, so it was just introduced this year. And it is actually for the second cohort. One of the cohorts is the 6+1 program, the other is the 5+2. Why? Because taking feedback from our stakeholders, from the placements where the students go to shadow in year 6, we had the feedback, and even from the examiners, the students cannot articulate a whole case from the beginning till the end. At UCL, they had the case of the month. Actually, it was not easy to apply it at New Giza, so we had to have a different training, formatively, repeatedly, on OSLER or long case, okay? And after discussion with our partners, we conducted formative assessment for long cases, and it is introduced into our summative assessment this year. Physical environment necessitated a lot of adaptation. We had to have different room sizes to accommodate the different activities with different number of students. Case-based discussions and clinical reasoning sessions were done in placements. At the end of the day, there was these sessions conducted, and this needed talking to placements, because we did outsource, and this was a new concept in Egypt. In Egypt, each medical school has its own facility, hospital facility. And it's a mandate by law. For end of the day, we have to have our facility. But we adopted this concept of outsourcing from the British system, and we started saying, why not? Why not using other resources present in the country? And it turned out to be really an excellent idea, because now when you ask students, what would you like to change later on, particularly the alumni of this cohort, they said, change whatever you wish, but never change the outsourcing. We feel we learned more, we were more exposed, and we saw a lot of cases, much more compared to our colleagues in other medical schools. Adopting and adapting this outsourcing, where the staff did the supervision and coaching in year 3. Year 3, and as Dr. Rashid mentioned, was a form of the integrated clinical care. And it was like supervised clinical training or clinical practice. And then this again shifted gradually to shadowing, to complete shadowing of the healthcare providers at the outsourced facilities, whether university facilities or Ministry of Health facilities, with no direct supervision or coaching from our faculty staff. However, students return to the campus for 2 days in a week. They go to the placements 4 days in a week, 4 complete days. They return where case-based discussions, the revision of their portfolios, of their reflections, receiving what they did and seeing what they did in their week. Patients in campus was again a new concept. It was applied in year 1 and 2. At first, we didn't understand what is meant by patient in campus. And then we understood that year 1 and 2, the student does not need to examine a patient, but he needs to know what happened to this patient, what are the challenges he or she meets, from where does he get his medicine, any challenges in that, it's just a narration. What, does he know about the complications? How is his family affected? So patients came in campus for patients' narrations. This does not mean that students did not do clinical examination. They did, but in the skill lab on mannequins in year 1 and 2. Tasks were designed to help enhance students' soft skills, creativity, and innovation rather than only mere written assignments. Of course, we did have challenges, and we still do. We were facing the challenge how we are not dragged to spoon feeding, because the students, our clients, were used to spoon feeding. For example, they would tell you, we need a bank for the questions. We need a bank for the questions. And we say, no, we don't have a bank for the questions. We are not giving you a bank for the questions. They would say, I need a book. I need something to study to. One student once told me, when my father asks me, where do you study from? What should I answer? All my colleagues in the other schools have books. And we have to say,
my kids all the time because they aren't
see, even Dr. Samar is asking her kids. So it took 1.5, 2 years. Now we don't have this question at all. Never, ever. They have the textbook nominated at the end of the lecture. They have the chapters and no more than that. A challenge again was maintaining the ratio between the contact and non-contact hours. There was resistance to accept an ungraded but important formative assessment like the portfolio, which is a prerequisite to enter the end of year exam. SBAs, OSPs, and OSCEs were a challenge versus essays, viva, and oral exams. Peer pressure from students, SIBs, relatives, and friends in other medical schools. The COVID situation required extra efforts to be able to fulfill the ILOs and at the same time abide to the national COVID regulations, especially with year 4, the clinical year, being delivered for the first time. In the COVID situation, clinical placements were delivered after the release of the shutdown from July to August, and the exams were conducted in September that year. Actually, another very big challenge was that Egypt, New Giza started the modular integrated system in partnership with UCL. 2 days later, government of Egypt decided to have the 5+2 integrated modular program and redesign the program. Again, we had to have 2 cohorts, 2 programs running in parallel with what was necessitated from changing out new credit units and other requisites. The experience of starting a new program that was challenging the ordinary from day 1 was not easy, yet it was very rich. It involved a team, sorry, I have to go back. It involved a team can I go back 1 slide? I'm sorry. No. الأول خالص. It's the last slide. It involved a team that believed it could be done, both from our partners at UCL as well as from the School of Medicine team who worked hardly and passionately. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Merci à vous.
I feel so proud to be coming from where Professor Lamia Mohsen is coming from. And of course, I have to say that she is the dean of my kids. My kids are being educated in her school, and I have seen the amazing work that is being done at New Giza and how everything is changing there in New Giza. So I would like to thank her a lot for being here among us. Thank you so much. And thank you for tolerating the changes that we're doing. And I want to rely on your good nature to accept the changes that we are doing now again in our program, to try to not keep you away from your lunch, which we know is very important and it will be very elegant, so we don't want you to miss the fun of the lunch. And this is why we are doing a little bit of an amendment to the program. I want to invite Professor Mohammed Taha. Mohammed Taha is a very good friend of ours. I think we've been friends with Dr. Mohammed Taha for years now. We've had the collaborations ongoing while I was back in Egypt, and I consider him a good friend and ally, but nevertheless, he is also a very well-structured educationist that has been moving from school to school and is now giving his wisdom and his capacity to Sharjah University. So I want to welcome him as the Medical Education Director in Sharjah University to give us a little bit of an overview about how the Sharjah University new curriculum is coming along. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammed.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. I am delighted to be here to share some thoughts regarding the development of medical education curricula and the future perspective. And actually, it is challenging for me to talk after Professor Janid and Professor Hussam Hamdi. However, I'd like to share some aspects that related to the curriculum development, consider the current situations and the way forward. And my presentations my presentation have three themes, starting from reflections over the 120 years of medical education, then the emerging themes of health profession education, and finally, the future forward. I'd like to share the roadmap and the milestones of the development of medical education over the last century. And as you know, and I think most of the educators in the room, starting from pre-Flexner models in which the medical education was not organized like the situation that we have. Then, after a very well-known change in medical education done by Flexner in 1910, then the shape of medical education has been changed till early 70s with the start of problem-based learning and community-based medical education, taken into consideration to move more toward student-centered learning and engaging the community. Then the notions of community-based, competence-based medical education move forward with the challenge of assessing the competence of medical graduates, then the development of entrustable professional activities and milestones come across the road. This was accompanied by the need to engage the medical schools with the society, and then the notion of social accountability take place, in which the medical schools should direct the curricula, the research, and the community service toward addressing the community needs. And along the road, there is the need to have a group of professions learn together, work together. This is for interprofession educations and practice. And I'd like to emphasize on the points that raised by Professor Janet Grant. Whatever the curriculum that we have, contextualize the curriculum is very important. So addressing the context and having the uniqueness of your region is very important for the curriculum. I will address the important component that related to the learners, the community, the subject matter, and the healthcare system when thinking about the curriculum. And one of the things that we need to focus on nowadays, we have different sort of learner, we have different type of learners, and there is a different generations between the faculty members and the learners. These very important things that need to be considered when designing and when delivering any curriculum. And most importantly, also, we would like to highlight the importance of considering the equity, inclusions, and the diversity of the learners when designing the curriculum. And as you know, our learners now, different from the learners in the last decades. They are digitally oriented and connected to the internet. And they tend to have immediate feedback. This is very important to consider when designing the curriculum, when thinking about the assessment. And they have different expectations. So the curricula should consider having clear outcomes, clear support to the learner, active engagement, learning opportunities, exposure to real-world clinical setting, keep with knowledge expansions of medicine and developing the lifelong learning skills of the learners, developing the resilience, particularly with the challenge that we have now and with the lessons that we learned from COVID-19 experience. And most importantly, now the issue of globalization is taking place. So the graduates will work in different countries and will deal with patients with unexpected usual outcomes. Also, the community requirement has been changed. And there is change in healthcare landscape. The curricula should address the cultural issues of the community and the cost of management. So this issue need to be highlighted in the curricula. And then the issue of and the concept of patient-centered curriculum is very important. We'd like to think about how we can graduate physicians that can take care of the patients, not taking care of the disease. And also the technology, including the telemedicine and the health informatics. When looking to the curriculum, at the content, these issues need to be emphasized. And actually, this is emerging issues in the curricula. Considering the health equity, technology in health, global health issue, environmental health, and one of the direction of the country is to focus on the sustainability issues. Again, COVID-19 brought to us important issues that need to be considered, such as global health, public health, and taking care of patient safety, doctor safety, and so on. The health system changed nowadays, and this issue also needs to be considered. The health system requires to graduate socially accountable physicians with demonstrate clinical competence, communicate effectively, practice evidence-based medicine, emphasize on patient safety, and demonstrating professionalism. And this has led to important change in the design and approach of the medical curricula with a shift to competency-based medical education, having more authentic teaching and learning approach, and inclusion of surface learning and the issue of the clerkships. Also, COVID-19 affects the design by taking into consideration these important issues and the challenge of the assessment. The focus now from curriculum, thinking of curriculum, then learning outcome and assessment, the focus here on the health system needs, the competence, and then how we assess these competence. I brought this picture because if we are not well prepared for the future, so we may encounter challenge to align between the current situation with the future directions and the future demands of the medical education. The last two slides will be the way forward. And in order to move together, and I'm presenting this African proverb, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And this is time to go together in order to prepare curricula that can fit our needs at country level and regional level. And in recent published papers, this is the trends of health professional education in US. And I think we are having the same trend, including interprofessional education, longitudinal integrated clerkship, social determinants of health continuum, shifting to competency-based medical education, and the integration of artificial intelligence. This is my last slide, and I think we are in the right track, and we are proud that this Thursday we have signed the National Competency Framework Emirati way, and I think this is the right way to start together, to work together in order to prepare a better future that can serve our community. I'd like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to have this talk and looking forward to learn from each other. Thank you.
Yani you can always rely on friends when it comes to issues like flexibility. Thank you, Dr. Muhammad. Dr. Muhammad's talk was supposed to be 20 minutes, but he very kindly cut down on everything just so that your lunch is not late. So we don't need the lunch to be late, okay? I just want to thank everyone who gave us insight about the curriculum. And in order to make sure that our program stays on time, we have made the decision
Department of Psychiatry at State Medical University. I shouldn't say this, but I will. I attended with him an assessment person in Sultan Qaboos, which outsourced to Sultan Qaboos University in 2004. Long time ago, what he said. Yes, Ibrahim was as a student at that time. Dr. Sini is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at State Medical University and a fellow of presence at Center at Stanford Medical School. Previously, he held positions at FEMA and the American Board of Internal Medicine. He has more than 200 publications. He lectured and taught in more than 45 countries and is on the editorial board of several field journals. He is an honorary fellow of the Royal College of General Practitioners UK and the Academy of Medical Educators and has received numerous awards, including the Karolinska Prize for Research in Medical Education and the Hoover Award. He's going to speak to us later about the assessment system. Also, I would like to introduce Professor Ibrahim Nawab. He's a medically qualified professor of anatomy, so he is also an anatomist. And Professor of Anatomy, Education, and former Associate Dean at MPRU, Muhammad bin Rashid University. He is medically qualified and he is now in MPRU and he is an alumnus of the University of Sheffield and University of Dundee, both in UK. Another medical educator experience of over 30 years at colleges of medicine in the UK, Africa, and the Middle East. He is a fellow of the Academy of Medical Educators and the Higher Education Academy, both in the United Kingdom, and he will later be talking to us about deploying the OSCE as I intended. I would also like to introduce Professor Salman Moraya from the University of Sharjah. He is a Vice Dean in the College of Medicine, University of Sharjah, UAE, and he is the head of surgery unit and a professor of surgery, a colorectal surgeon and medical educator. He is a senior editor of BNC Medical Education and Frontiers of Surgical Oncology. He published around 200 research articles about interprofessional collaboration technology in medical curricular interventions and colorectal surgery. He is the director of postgraduate surgical courses by the Royal College of Surgeons of England and Blended Learning England. The others were introduced in the session, so we will start straight away with our question. Because the curriculum part is already done, so I will start question about the curriculum to our speakers, and I will start with Professor Janis Brown. Professor Janis, how do you see context affecting the overall adaptation of the curriculum, especially with the concept of consultancy becoming an inherent issue in the collaborative environment of curriculum design? Context. Okay.
I'm glad this context together. Thank you very much for an extremely complicated question. If anyone can remember it, I will mind briefly. I haven't written down because I couldn't remember it. So there are a number of issues that you've raised there. You've raised the issue of context. You've raised the issue of consultancy. You've raised the issue of collaboration. And all of those things will mean different things to different people. So as with anything in social science, the first thing to do is to define the terms. Context, as we've been saying all morning, affects absolutely everything. But you need to define what you mean by that. So I think that as people gradually start they need to start talking about what they mean by that. Because we hear so many words in medical education that keep on being repeated, and I'm quite sure that if you ask people to define them, they couldn't. Learner centre would be one. Constructivism, I think we were talking about this morning, would be another. There are so many words that medical education has that never get defined, and therefore don't have practical meaning. So I think that we need to know what we mean by context, and that's the first future conversation. It does affect absolutely everything. You also mentioned really interestingly about the adaptation to context, and we've heard a wonderful talk from Professor about exactly how that is done between Rukisa and University College London. And there were so many really good lessons that were relevant to this question in that, related to the idea of collaboration and consultancy. Consultancy really worries me. It really worries me. We bring people in believing that they know better than us, when very often they don't. But consultants can help you to understand what you want. And that, to me, is again something we need to think about. The idea that there is an expert somewhere else who knows more about your situation than you do is not the correct idea. So I think the meaning of consultancy, and I would say that what we've heard about the way things have done with Rukisa, with the modification of an existing curriculum, is a wonderful example of that. So consultancy, be very careful about who your consultant is and who you choose. I've spent a lot of time in my life running around the world picking up the pieces after someone comes in and tells people to do things incorrectly. And then finally, you ask about the collaborative environment. Is there really a collaborative environment? I mean, we saw in this example of Rukisa a wonderful examination. But is there really collaboration? Collaboration to me means equality, means equal trust and equal respect on both sides. It means that both sides learn equality. When we see consultants coming from India to the United Kingdom to tell us how to do it, when we see ideas like education from your country coming to my education, to my country, then I'll agree with collaboration. So I think again we need to be very careful in our definition of collaboration. And for me, and this is our end here, for me what all this means is when you want something to be done where you are, it needs to be done on your terms.
Thank you very much. I think when we pass to Hungary to answer all questions, it may be maybe also reflect or comment on what Prof. Grant said about the three issues he addressed: the contextualization and the collaboration and the adaptation. But our question would be, how, in your opinion, can we ensure that schools maintain a competitive advantage despite the alignment with the newly issued Immaculate competency?
Okay. Why we should, your point is on how I can do better or advantage to the advantage, which is against what just Chinese also say about collaboration, which has to take place. I am very big believer in collaboration, and I don't see any sort of threat to what is said. You are advancing and you are working with other medical schools for a win-win situation. Both of you better. Not everything can be mentioned in context, can be taken as it is, as an adaptation that Modular shows us how to manage it. But I think we should work together more and more. If I go to the context in UAE, and we are approximately, I think, 7 million schools in UAE, we should be working, and actually we are working together to some extent, but there is a lot of room of working and learning from each other, because generally speaking, it's the same context, same country, with a lot of differences between government, semi-government schools, private schools, and private schools, as I was mentioning, or is something which will continue. Everything now has to be sustainable. So I think there is a lot of room of working together, and we should work together. When you relate it to the competency framework, as I was saying, there are no differences. It's how we are going to contextualize it, and how we are going to implement it, and how we are going to assess it. Particularly in the big domains everyone is talking about it, professionalism, ethic, empathy, healthcare systems, and so on, which they call it sometimes soft skills, which I don't think they are soft skills. They are, you can call them power skills, or they are the real hard skills, which we are all struggling how we can do it in our own context. So let's work together, particularly on these domains, in addition to the others. And I'm sure our success in any one of the colleges here, learning, of course, from abroad, we can work together more and more, and all of us will going to win.
But if I may, having this new Emirates means we now have a new yardstick, a new benchmark that schools might need to comply with. So where do we strike?
It is not new. It is not new. That's what I was saying.
It's not new. You said 40 years ago people were talking about the same thing.
Well, they're all similar. All these frameworks looks the same. There is not.
Okay. You are confident that you don't need this competitive advantage, but many schools do take it seriously. What is your view? You said.
Well, it's up to them. Well, I see the importance of collaborating and working together, rather than. That's why who was talking this morning? I think Professor Ahmed from USN about the ranking, and I do believe exactly like him about this ranking, and I became now 600. I was 700 last year, and so on. And actually, this is a sort of showing that you are better than others, but not really of that importance in improving the quality of education.
Thank you very much. Since you mentioned Prof. Rashid, I turn to him and ask, from your experience, Prof. Ahmed, do you think assessment programs or plans can be adopted? We bring it from somewhere.
Prof. Marty, your voice is very low. Can you have the mic a little closer, please?
Yeah, okay, sure. Okay, again, from your experience, do you think assessment programs or plans can be adopted and shared across institutions? And how much adaptation is needed to allow for proper deployment of assessment programs and plans?
Sure. So I think you've heard a wonderful example this morning already about that adaptation of an assessment model from UCL to New Giza. And I think what Dr. Lamia said was absolutely spot on, which is that there are both technical and what you might call non-technical aspects of challenge when it comes to that adaptation. So what I mean by the technical is that there are certain regulations, for example, around the percentage of your score that can come from in-course assessment or in-semester assessment versus end-of-year assessment. So there are regulations in different jurisdictions which would perhaps require you. So, for example, at UCL, we have a summative assessment that happens entirely at the end of the year. We don't have summative assessment in course. In New Giza, they do have a requirement to have in-semester assessment. So there are reasons why you can't entirely use the same approach. But then I think what was really interesting that Dr. Lamia said were, I suppose, the non-technical reasons. And, you know, she talked about the culture of having a faculty that were not entirely willing to change to a new model. And some of those reasons may be valid, some may be less valid. But I think it's, and as well as the faculty, it's also the students, of course. So I think there's an entire piece which is around the winning over people and actually listening to people. Some of those reasons, as I said, will be entirely valid and should be taken into account. So I think the job that she's done is really quite remarkable, which is to really take people along with her and understand and listen and take time to really understand what their concerns are and how to alleviate those. And I think the adaptations that she described were about compromise. They were about saying, this is the direction we're traveling. The pace of change may vary according to some of those challenges. So it's not to say that we're not going to end up in the same place that we set out in our vision, but perhaps the pace will adapt according to some of those challenges. And if I can just, I mean, relevant to that is the collaboration and consultancy piece that we just talked about. And I think what's central really to that is that those collaborations and those consultancy agreements don't really happen between organizations and institutions. They happen between individual people. And I think it's really important for us to recognize the relational and human element of those collaborations. So if there is respect, if there's reflexivity, if there's humility in the individuals that are involved, then those are much more likely to be successful, and there's much more likely for you to end up in a place where there is genuinely something meaningful that's happening in those collaborations. So I think in both the assessment adaptation, but also more broadly in the collaboration, I think it's really important to understand the relational aspect to all of that.
Thank you very much. And now I move to Professor Salman Quraya. And being a surgeon and a vice dean, currently we are at the crossroads of educational reforms in the medical field. In your opinion, what elements of medical education should be incorporated in the medical core competencies and curricula to achieve optimal clinical outcomes?
Thank you very much. Very interesting question. First, I would like to argue that when we are at the crossroads of educational reforms, we should be able to apply what we need, not to bring the whole set of curriculum from outside. I always call it transplant without tissue matching and cross matching. If we are just taking the whole thing from outside and try to implant it here, we may end up with immediate transplant reactions or long term. What I want to emphasize is that what are the community needs? Healthcare conditions which are rampant here in this part of the world might not be relevant or even common in the part of the world where we are bringing the curriculum in. So probably we should be very careful in adapting different curricula. And of course, we have to customize it to navigate our community societal needs. Second thing, according to the question now, I would like to answer in a way, let's say, I would pitch the new emerging concepts into three levels. Macro level, higher level, then meso level, and lastly the micro level. So at a higher level, holistically, I would say health promotion and disease prevention. This is the target of all medical education, undergrad, graduate and residency programs and healthcare systems.
In other words, I am talking about preventive medicine. And if you see the curricula, you tap your literature, very little effort is being directed towards preventive medicine, especially in this country, especially in the Middle East. I would emphasize that in our curricula, there is a need to emphasize the need for preventive medicine, because if we can prevent a medicine, so I would say 3/4 of the battle is over, and we can deal with a healthy community. Second part of macro level is academic and physician leaderships. Doctors are leaders. Sometimes they lead their teams, and sometimes they should be well equipped and skilled in becoming a team member. But somehow we are not able to inculcate leadership skills into medical students in undergraduate level. There are curricula where you will find some elements, but this needs more attention. Coming to the meso level, I would say this is all team working. Team working, we cannot ignore interprofessional education and practice, where we have to change our attitudes. I would say professional values, behaviors, and identities should be very well mixed up in a cocktail to change our behaviors. How can we work in teams? How should we lean on others? And all the ultimate goal remains the improvement in quality of healthcare. Lastly, in the micro level, I would say there are certain elements which are, I don't know, we have overcrowded curricula, or sometimes the complexity of the healthcare systems do not allow us to change the curricula. One of the factor is medical insurance and financing and budgeting. So all the time when we are graduating our students, they come into the medical practice, somehow they come across these financing and budgeting problems because we are not trained, we are not skilled. Probably we need more attention towards these elements. Then compassionate care, empathic care, we have already been listening since morning. Somehow because of the over dominance of our technology system, patient is moving away from the center, from the heart of healthcare systems. In the morning as a surgeon, I go to the clinics, in the OR, in the ward rounds, I look into the huddle boards, electronic medical record systems, I take decisions. And later on, just a social visit to the ward to see the patient. So unless we have skills, competence, and have been trained enough to deal with the patient, perspective taking, probably we need more attention towards this element. Last thing, which is we always have fundamental role of medical professionalism. Now there is another emerging term, e-professionalism, where we need to know how healthcare workers, medical students, and frontline healthcare professionals should work in digital climate. So you might have seen every other day we see pictures of the patients, smiling faces with the surgeon on social media, without knowing that did we take consent from the patient? What are the regulations? Am I breaching some regularity or social media regulations or no? Probably we need to train our medical students and our physicians that there are certain ethics, protocols that we need to follow in the digital climate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for an elaborate explanation. Again, back to assessment, Professor Inua, from your experience, I know you are going to talk to us later about the deployment of the OSCE, but the OSCE as an instrument, how can it be adopted? Okay. How can the OSCE as an instrument be used in establishing a proper understanding of students' levels and informing decisions on student progression?
Okay, thank you very much. Tough one for me, but I will give it a try. First, I'm aware that we are the, if you like, the guilty party between you and your lunch. So I will try as much as possible to be as precise as I can. Yes, as Professor Al-Mardi said, I will be giving a very 40,000 feet talk on OSCE, and I borrowed from the concept of utility of an assessment from an eminent assessment guru. However, what I will just say here is that, first and foremost, for the audience, I am a card-carrying anatomist, okay? I'm a basic scientist, but I know that in my role in the medical school, I have to look at the bigger picture, which is that I am part of a team that is training health professionals who are going to become doctors, dentists, nurses, and so on. So in many situations when I talk about assessment with colleagues, I had to yield my anatomy brain to look at the bigger picture. So I'm acutely aware of that. However, I always feel that whenever we talk about assessment, and especially OSCE specifically, which is testing something that is very specific, and actually that specific thing is a cocktail of almost all the learning domains, as we know. Often the challenge is that as tutors, we tend to bring it down to be testing only one component of the learning domains, and that's one of the challenges that I have faced. So importantly, I think sometimes we may need to go back to basics. OSCE, what is it for? And what does it test? Because then that is going to help us to be able to design the OSCE as an authentic and a really worthwhile endeavor, because it's a very time-consuming and very costly process. So that is, I think, the point that I'm going to make. Let's go back to basics whenever we are thinking about OSCE, and there's a lot of literature on OSCE, on what it tests and what are examples of good OSCE items. I think that's all that I'm going to say for now, and I wonder if colleagues would have to add something here on that. John, I'm sure you are, no? Thank you so much.
Last and of course not least, Professor Norsini. Very important question, although people started thinking more and more about the lunch. But it's an important issue. Maybe you are going to address it in your talk later on about assessment. But we want to hear from you. Do you perceive a plan for assessment for competency-based curriculum? And what points should this be planned? And what are the most important issues that need to be covered in this plan? Briefly, please. Thank you.
Well, you know, you just gave me something this big and said make it this big. let me be very brief, because I will cover this later.
A plan for competency-based curriculum.
So the point I want to make is that traditionally we've considered assessment as being part of courses, because curricula were built around the courses and you just added them all up and you got a result at the end of the day. So assessment was embedded within courses. I think competency-based assessment forces you to think about assessment longitudinally throughout the curriculum, creates a series of dependencies along the way, and as a consequence of that, it requires a system of assessment. So we need to stop thinking about assessment in course context and think about it in curricular context. So it's critical from my perspective that assessment be part of the curriculum planning process. Historically, what we've done is we've created a new curriculum, and then we said, oh geez, how are we going to assess it? So I think assessment needs to be built into that process. So the planning, which will be contextual, needs to be part of the curriculum development process. The rest of it I'll talk about after lunch.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being with us. And thank you very much for all the panelists for very important inputs they fed in the conversation. Thank you very much. Back to you, Prof. Samar.
Thank you, Prof. Mardi, for keeping the day intact. Thank you so much for all our panelists. Yeah. Can I ask you to please come down to your, there was so much background noise. Come down to your seats, please. Join us in the floor.
Proceeding forward, I would like to draw your attention to yet another subject of eminent importance in the current times, which is simulation-based education, which is an essential pedagogical approach of providing students with the opportunity to practice real-life skills in real-life situations and promote the use of critical and evaluative thinking. In view of the same, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the session. He is an active researcher and the director of the Simulation Center at DMCG, and an expert in healthcare simulation and digital education. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly welcome Dr. Yunus Zidoun.
Thank you, Dr. Afra. So hello, everyone. And I ensure you I will not make any jokes about the lunch. I will go directly to the point. So we are promising you a very good session, simulation session with the top of the field experts with us that we are very thankful to have today. And without any further delay, I will introduce to you our first speaker. And just as a short analogy, he's my master. I learned simulation from him. And I remember just back in 2014, I couldn't make it to his session because there is a lot of students around that place. I couldn't make it. Like students tried to check the session from the windows, so he made simulation very fun, simulation very passionate for us to learn. So I would like to introduce to you Professor Mouhawi Mohammed. He is the chairman for the Simulation Society in Morocco, and he is the head of the emergency department in the University, Casablanca University Hospital, and he is the professor of anesthesiology. Please, Professor Mouhawi, join the stage.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Hayyakum Allah. I'm very pleased, honored, and delighted to be part of this wonderful journey. So I want to thank the organizing committee for the quality of the scientific program, and especially Professor Samar for her benevolence, and my dear Yunus. And you have a great chance to have Yunus part of your team. Thank you for your kind words. So I'm coming from Morocco. I was asked to talk about the state of art about simulation in the field of healthcare. So I will introduce you myself. So I'm Mohammed Mouhawi. I'm basically an anesthesiologist. I'm working in the field of emergency medicine. I'm the head of the emergency department in the University Hospital of Casablanca. And I'm also president of the Morocco SIM, and Morocco SIM is the Moroccan Society of Simulation. I will talk later about the Morocco SIM. So I have 3 kids, and as I said all the time, simulation in healthcare is my 4th kid. Since I was involved in simulation more than 10 years, I love teaching. I love my kids. Other kids are medical students. So regarding disclosure, I declare that I have nothing to disclose, but rather I have a little bit story to talk. It will be my own story, a real story, our story about the beginning, the development, and the implementation of simulation in Morocco. As all the stories in the world, each story has its ups, downs, sometimes more downs, sometimes more ups, and you will see with me that finally we will have more ups than more downs. The best, thank you, sorry. The most, okay, thank you. The most important thing is to learn lessons from those stories and to move on for the benefit of the medical education for our kids, medical students. The story goes back to 2007. I have to represent my dean. I was responsible for presenting a conference about medical education. This conference was held in Spain, in Granada, at a center that we called CIMAT. And CIMAT is organized under the umbrella of the Levante. Levante is like something like a European Institute for Healthcare Training. This is where I discovered for the first time simulation. 1 year later, our Ministry of Health established cooperation and partnership with SAMU de France. SAMU de France is something about a pre-hospital system, but following European system. And SAMU de France gave us the first gift. It was about the first high-fidelity mannequin. It was so easy just to turn off, and we thought that simulation is so easy. 1 year later, in 2009, the Ministry of Higher Education gave us a lot of money and asked us to propose some project to improve medical education, level the medical education. We have a lot of money, so I proposed to create the first medical simulation center in our faculty. This is the Faculty of Medicine and Pharmacy of Casablanca. By the way, the Minister of the Higher Education asked me, so if you have some equipment to buy, just tell us. In my mind, I thought that simulation equal mannequin. I have no idea, no experience, so I picked up a list from internet, and in my mind, I thought that even I ask for a lot of equipment, I will not have it. And you know what? Like a magic lamp, I have all the equipment I asked for. It's about, let me tell you in dollar, it's about $3 million, $30 million. And I have all the equipment I asked for, but no instructors, no people to use this equipment. And the equipment stays storage in the room. So I have to move to Paris for 1 year to perform the first university degree about simulation in healthcare in Paris. It took me 1 year, and then I was back to Morocco, and I was very proud. But once back to Morocco, the dean changed. And what a change. And I have heard the worst sentence I have heard all my life. You know what? The new dean told me, you're giving me a headache with your doors. You are wasting my and your time. Stop. Never talk to me about stimulation. It was a slap, a great slap for me. And I was thinking to leave Morocco and be back to Europe. It was very great slap for me. I attempted a second chance. I organized a first master class But unfortunately, there was just 5 or 6 people to attend to this masterclass. No success. And we entered to the dark age. It was occurring between 2011 and 2014. No simulation, no training, no instructors. I understood finally that before equipment, we have mandatory to train, to teach instructor. I want to go alone to do it quickly, but my colleague said, I had to go together like a team. In 2015, one of my medical students asked me to organize with them a virtual meeting about discussion of clinical cases. And it was really a very great successful. Later, I arranged a little room about 12 square meters, and we started our first medical simulation scenario. And in 2015, we organized the first 100% Moroccan masterclass about teaching the instructor using simulation in healthcare. This was really something very great. And the best thing I have experienced all my life, or my professional life, was that the creation of our learning society is the Morocco SIM. Morocco SIM is the Moroccan Society of Medical Simulation. In Morocco SIM, we were and we are convinced that simulation is a technique, it is not a technology. Our focus, it was on the human factor. Equipment is good, but before that, it's very important to stay focused in the human factors. Morocco SIM component is a board. We have a several committee regarding guidelines, regarding recommendation for best practice. We have some clubs, scientific journal, networking, a data bank for scenarios, and we develop several programs for continuous professional development. We start our first competition that we call the SIM Cup. And SIM Cup allows us to be more visible among even medical doctors, but also large public. We'll start organizing masterclass. Masterclass is about 2 to 3 days training the trainees. Something about the basic of simulation. The basic of simulation, how to run a scenario, how to develop pedagogic program, how to develop evaluation and research program. Right now, we have more than 500 to 600 instructors by masterclass. Regarding the success of masterclass, we move to another stage. We organize a university degree about teaching but using simulation in healthcare. Right now, we have more than 120 professors that they had their university degree. There was a big event in Morocco. We have a medical student team, and they won a great international competition against the European team. It was a huge event in Morocco, and that allows us to prove that simulation is really useful. And we began to develop medical simulation center. Right now, we have more than 30 simulation centers all around Morocco. During the pandemic, I was in charge to manage patients at the emergency department. But I said, thank you, the pandemic. Pandemic proved that our method of simulation can be useful either in telesimulation way. So, tell me, yes, it's close. So we work about telesimulation way. We create the first serious game about managing patients regarding pandemic in the office of doctors. So this is the telesimulation scenarios. We work a lot in the field of research. So we wrote a lot of books, theses, publication, and lecture. One thing that we are working about in Morocco is teaching using a game. It's about a board game. It's about gamification in the medical schools. 2 updates. We are right now working about creating a mannequin 100% Moroccan. This is the software of the first Moroccan mannequin, high-fidelity mannequin. And we are also working about the first software using virtual reality to manage patients in the emergency department. The second big event, it was the organization, the first edition of the Healthcare Training and Innovation Conference. And also a conference for the nurse, as we are convinced that health is an interprofessional activity, not just medical. So, what are the lessons that we've learned? Simulation is a technique, not a technology. Human resource and teamwork is the most important point to focus on. You have to look for the good person to convince. You have to make the good opportunities. Medical students are powerful. Simulation is interprofessional and working hard and by the heart. Be passionate, be motivated. Love your simulation. Love simulation as your kids. So my last slide, I will be honored to invite you all of you, to be a part and to attend the second edition of our huge conference that we call the Healthcare Training and Innovation Conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mouhawi, for this insightful glance about simulation in Morocco. I will not take more time because I will give time to speakers. So our next speaker is a very good friend of mine, like we virtually, now it's official and it's physical. So he's one of the best debriefers, if you are familiar with debriefing techniques. He's one of the best debriefers I witnessed. So Mr. Richard Orman, please, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello, the Royal Atlantis. We're all here today, yes. Some of you have snuck off for a bit of early lunch. Congratulations. And thank you very much for that very generous introduction. My name is Richard Orman. I'm a simulation guy. I've been doing it for about 35 years now. I have been paid for that role. I've been involved in military simulation, was where I first started off during the Cold War, and become more involved in simulation-based medical education. So we're going to discuss some different aspects of what it is to be a simulation educator. There are definitions of it, but there's no hard or fast qualifications or entry routes into it. So we're going to look at what the role is, what do we actually do, how you can become a simulation educator, and if you do become involved in it, or you're currently involved in it, you might want to look at qualifications or certification. I was appointed to a UK NHS trust to implement a project to look at a new paediatric early warning score system. And my role was to use simulation at the point of care. For that simulation program, I was not Heston Blumenthal, obviously one of the chefs here, but I was the head chef and the bottle washer and everything in between. So I was the marketing department, I was the booking department, I was the transportation department, I was the technical department. So I had to do all aspects of everything, of just me as a one-man band. Now, this is not everything that is involved in simulation. Those of you in the room will understand this, but I'm just trying to give you a brief overview of what we do when we run a simulation scenario. First of all, we need to write the scenario. It needs to be relevant to the context of what our environment is, but it also needs to be relevant, and the outcomes and objectives need to be relevant to our learners. We need to set up the scenario. Some of you may have seen some of the equipment outside, the high-tech stuff, and we keep talking about high technology with regards to medical education. We then have to run the scenario. And then finally, we debrief the scenario. That's where a lot of the learning often takes place. So, pardon me. Different ways of becoming a simulation educator. You may see jobs advertised where people are full-time employed to become simulation educators, and I've taken that role on in the past. But sometimes, simulation may be just part of your job. As we alluded to in the previous presentation, simulation is a technique, it's not a technology, and it's not all about simulation. Although I have worked with other people who say to me, simulation's the answer. Now, what's the question? Look at your learners, look at what your patients' needs are, and look at what your objectives are. You may be an adjunct member of a sim centre, but you may have no experience at all. And there's two ways that you can develop your faculty. One way is by throwing them in the deep end and getting them involved in running simulation, or you can put them through some sort of training program. We've already had some allusions to this earlier on, that there may now be some of that available in the region. But we also had some discussion around buying in consultancy from overseas. So there's some very, very well-known people within simulation that are quite happy to come to your centre and deliver a faculty development program. Or indeed, you can send your staff overseas to their facility to go through the same program. They're very good. They're very credible people. They're very, very expensive. And will it make you a better simulation educator? Maybe, maybe not. But we've already learned so far today, there's a lot of expertise in this region, in the GCC, even in this room. So do we have to go overseas? Can we not collaborate together and work together to develop our own local systems that are more tailored to our needs? Can anybody tell me what this is a picture from, a film? Some of you may have seen this. It's called The Wizard of Oz. What's The Wizard of Oz got to do with simulation and medical education? Well, these are 4 different characters, 4 individuals from different backgrounds with different strengths and different weaknesses. They took a journey together, a bit like our journey to excellence today. The key thing about these, and I want to focus on one of them, the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow was a man made of straw. He believed that he wasn't clever because he didn't have a brain. But then when he went to visit the wizard gave him a piece of paper. And all of a sudden he felt clever because he got that bit of paper that said he was clever. He wasn't clever because of the paper. He was clever because of the journey and the experience that he'd shared with his colleagues. And this is very much like what we are doing. Each and every one of you in this room is an expert in your own field. But you can't create a medical student and turn them into a physician by yourself. It takes teamwork. This is what I call the Wizard of Oz approach to academia. That somebody can have a bachelor's, a master's, or a PhD degree, and all of a sudden they're clever, and they're able to teach. And we know that's not true. So what can we do to develop our staff if we want to take them beyond what is just covered in a practical course? There's a number of different organisations devoted to healthcare. We've heard about the one in Morocco today, which is great to see more new organisations coming on board. The Association of Simulation in Healthcare in the UK offers accreditation. So you can have accreditation as an individual, or you can have accreditation for your organisation. The Society for Simulation in Healthcare, which is based in the US but covers international centres as well, they offer, again, certification for you as an individual, and they also offer accreditation for programs. You can get various master's programs. It's great to hear there's at least one in the region now in Morocco. I really look forward to the day that we might see one within the GCC. Maybe some of the key opinion leaders in this room today, maybe I might have planted a seed and we can perhaps collaborate on developing one of those. I'm going to focus mostly now on the SSH one. Not because it's an American and because it's the best, but it's probably the most well-established program, and it's certainly one that is accepted within this region and seems to carry more weight. This is the book that is basically the program that outlines the roadmap, if you will, to the certification in CHSE, Certified Healthcare Simulation Educator. Does having the CHSE make you a better educator? I don't know. But what it does do, it tells the world that you have been measured and that you've met a standard. Now, it is possible to achieve this certification purely by reading this book. It does not assess your practical ability to design, run, or debrief a scenario. So I think a combination of both is there. If you're interested in becoming certified as an educator, or indeed as an alternative qualification or certification for simulation operations specialist, that's focusing more on the administrative and technical side. Both of these qualifications have a baseline criteria, and they also have an advanced version as well. So both would expect you to have typically a bachelor's degree for the CHSE, technical experience for the CHSOS, and then when you move to the advanced level, you're expected to have the first level as your baseline qualification, but then you have proof that you've developed that. And the first steps to those exams is available online. You can do it in your home, or you can take the exam at a proctor centre, and there's several of those centres certainly within the UAE. The advanced roles require you to have a portfolio of evidence. So it's not just about sitting an exam, you have to have practical experience, including references and other elements that you can add to your portfolio to prove that you've earned a title. And these are titles that go after your name. You don't have to be a member of the Society for Simulation in Healthcare. If you are a member, your exam fees are slightly reduced. So we've talked about the role of simulation educator. We've talked about some of the routes in there. And we've talked about some of the options for development and certification. We've talked an awful lot about simulation and technology. What I want to do is just leave you with something to just think about. Maybe is technology what you need for your program, or are there other things that you could do that might be a bit more meaningful?
Playing jazz.
Playing jazz.
Smoothie.
Making smoothie.
Calendar.
No meetings today. Remember, dentist at 9:30.
Fire off.
Fire off.
Open door.
Door open.
And we're gonna do one more.
Oh yeah. Open door.
Wrong voice command.
Open door.
Wrong voice command.
Open door.
Repeat that.
Open door.
I didn't understand that.
Hey, open door.
Play on the floor.
Get over the door. Open the door.
Wrong voice command. Error.
Hey there, with a rock. Open door. Open door. Open door. Open door.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Rish, for this insightful presentation. So do not take any further time. I will present my last speaker and what to say about this speaker. Actually, he's a professor, like those cool professors that embrace technology and use it. And most importantly, he make it accessible and affordable for his students to use in his teaching with it. So just to say, he's a consultant of gynecologic endoscopy and robotic surgery. He's a chief of minimal invasive endoscopy unit at Qasr Al Aini Medical School, Cairo University, where he graduated, later trained in chronic pelvic pain. His job doing in Visalka, he's the founder and the director of Visalka. His job doing there is just amazing. So without any further delay, I will welcome Professor Ahmed Minawi to the stage. Please.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure. Professor Tayyib, thank you very much for the offer of bringing me over here. Same to Dr. Samar, same to Dr. Yusuf Zidan. And let me start by saying that I've been asked to go quickly, so which button? The green button? Yes. Okay, my name is Ahmed Al-Minawi. I'm a professor of obstetrics and gynecology. For the past 30 years, I've been doing endoscopic and robotic surgery. I've been lucky enough to have basically apprenticed all over the world, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, University of Rochester, Geneva, and my home roots are Cairo, and that's where I am, and that's where I teach my fellow students and basically physicians. So today we're going to be talking about the growth pains. We're not Morocco, we're Egypt, so we're not as advanced, so to speak. So implementing virtual reality and assisted reality, augmented reality, proficiency-based training in endoscopic surgery and labor, and from the Egyptian perspective. So basically, we're a very poor resource country. And so not unlike basically my Moroccan colleague, we had no money. And so all of what I'm going to show you was basically done by anonymous donors who helped us. We had no input from the state or from the university whatsoever. So during Corona, of course, we had a big problem all over the world, as you know, and including Qasr Al Aini, where we had a huge decrease in elective cases all over the world, as you know. Like, for example, almost 28 million elective cases were canceled during that time. Same goes all over the world. Like in Ireland, for example, the majority of cases were canceled. 80% of cholecystectomies, for example, were done by the consultants, not by the young surgeons. And if we look at pediatric surgery in Europe during that time, you'll notice that there was a massive decrease, almost 50% decrease in elective surgeries. And so that, of course, was basically all over, not just in pediatric surgery. So basically, technology responded. And so everybody, of course, remembers how technology helped us and how basically we became dependent on Zoom meetings throughout this particular time frame. Should I use a different microphone? Is the microphone? Yeah, that's. Yes, this is a lot better. Thank you very much. And so basically what happened was everything changed after 2020. So nowadays, how do we train our doctors starting 2020 in advanced robotic surgery or laparoscopic surgery in absence of patients during that time, or how to train them to deal with difficult obstetric situations at any time? So until recently, we called this a virtual trinity, VR, AR, and MR. But currently, we call it basically mixed reality, which consists of virtual reality and augmented reality and mixed reality. So very quickly in Egypt, what happened? Well, this is my university, Cairo University, actually our medical school, which was built way back in 1825. We are on the Nile. We have a little island. We're at the tip of the island. Muhammad Ali, back in 1825, gave the orders, brought in Claude Bey from France, who put together our medical school, which has been almost 200 years in 2025. This is where we are located, those 6 buildings. And let me show you what's happening. In 2021, Qasr Al-Aini Medical School had roughly 55,000 elective surgeries. In our department here, we had about 5,000 elective surgeries, almost 20,000 deliveries, 37,500 gynecological visits, and 45,000 outpatient visits. What happened after the pandemic? 80% drop in elective surgery, 35% drop in delivery, 85% drop in outpatients, and major drop in our residency training. So Martin Luther King had a dream. I had a dream too. I had a dream that I would basically give all the experience I had to our residents. But the problem is this: it's unethical when you're teaching laparoscopy or robotic surgery, because this is hand-eye coordination. So you just can't okay, come on in and let's teach you this, this, and that on a patient. That does not work. And so we did not have any specific sim lab at Qasr Al-Aini except for the students, but nothing specific for postgraduate surgical training. And so we have to backtrack again to 2018. At that time, we started digital implementation, and we started this teratological museum, which is actually the only one like it in the world, fully QR coded, 1,300 specimens. You can actually check it, www.obgynmuseum.com. This was the initiative, and this basically was seen by some of my friends, and that's why you should stick to your friends. And they came to me and said, Ahmed, do you need anything? Can we help you with anything? And I said, yes, we need something. And they said, okay, we're ready to fund. And this is how we started Vizalka. Vizalka basically is our simulation lab, which stands for Virtual Endoscopic Simulation and Skills Acquisition Lab at Qasr Al-Aini. And we have students from all over. The lady on the left here, she's from China. She was our first master's thesis. Actually, this is part of the unit from the inside. These are some of our residents who are training. This is a surgical resident because we have the software for both surgery, obstetrics, gynecology, and urology, so we can basically be multidisciplinary. These are some other of our colleagues. Basically, virtual reality, as you know, we're in a three-dimensional artificial environment. This was our first simulator. The important thing about it is that we got it with haptic force feedback, so it allows them to basically not play a video game but actually feel what they're actually doing. And then we went forward, and last year we purchased another which was more ergonomic, which also helps out to a great degree, as you'll see. And then basically we also had added on 3D virtual reality, so allowing our students and our residents, newbies basically, to be in the operating theater more or less, so they can feel exactly what is going on. But that's not enough. We also went on and got a hysteroscopic simulator, which is extremely lifelike, and it's been one of our most popular simulators so far. We've trained quite a large number of people on this. And then also the IAD insertion, which, believe it or not, was what we first started out with, and I'll tell you something about that in a second. But anyhow, what happens is that my son, who studies robotic and mechatronics in Melbourne, told me something a few years back about something called the HoloLens, which was augmented reality. So I read up on it, found it was super useful, and so I purchased 2 of those, and then I smuggled them into Cairo, smuggled them literally, because they're still not available, and number 2, they're not allowed by the Mukhabarat or the Secret Service. But we have them. So anyhow, what's important about the augmented reality is that it allows us to integrate digital objects into real life. It's very, very important for anatomy. Like, for example, at Harvard, at Yale, they teach their students using basically the HoloLens anatomy. And we also wanted to combat the high cesarean section rate. And so I got a group of simulators that are manual simulators, so to speak, to teach our residents the basics, even though we have 20,000 deliveries a year, but the cesarean section is very high because they don't give the time to actually work on these high-risk problems and say, okay, let's just do the C-section, which is not correct at all. And so now we're bringing in augmented reality, which helps them a lot. So what's the difference between the apprenticeships that I did, or most of us did, and proficiency-based training programs? In proficiency-based training programs, we're required to demonstrate mastery of specific skills before progressing to more advanced skills. And with the fact that there's no time these days, this is a much better idea. So, well, we were able to get the equipment through the donations, but what about the trainers? This was a problem. How do you get a good trainer? Well, they have to have the right stuff, like the movie says, but they need to have enthusiasm, self-confidence, controlling power, thinkers, good organizing ability, conflict management, good communications, and they should be mastering the subject. But I can add also, over the past 3 years, I can tell you there's something else that's very important. Empathy. They have to put themselves in the shoes of the trainees. They have to basically make them feel we were in the same situation, and we know what you're going through, and therefore this empathy allows the learners to be at ease, and that's important. These are some of the basically doctors, assistant professors, lecturers, and residents who became trainers through our program, and we go through retreats every now and then. They have these basically games that they can sort of like get together with. We give them prizes at the end, and in the end, these are the trainers that will help us. And so the effectiveness of a program is not dependent on the curriculum or the simulator, but rather on the curriculum itself. And there are many ways of designing curriculums, proficiency-based. We'll talk about those tomorrow in the workshop, but basically there's also something that the trainer must be aware of, which is validity. Validity used to say that face validity was the most important, whether the model resembles the task or procedure it's aimed to train for. But nowadays, the modern definition is more important, that we have construct validity when we're talking simulation. That means that the machine can actually differentiate between the experienced and inexperienced participants and basically grade them accordingly. And so these are the results after training the trainers. Now they help us in basically putting together programs. We have multiple proficiency-based training programs. We have routinely scheduled laparoscopic and stereoscopic courses for the residents. We have multiple PhD and master's degrees theses. This was the first one that was done by Yangxi from China. We had 20 trainees learning laparoscopy. Another one here, also 21st year residents, also laparoscopy. And this is another, this is using the new articulated laparoscopic instruments, which work like robotic instruments more or less, and basically that's currently being done as we speak. We have 20 first-year residents versus 20 expert surgeons, and another one, this is going to be during actual surgery. All of these were, this one has just been finished. We had on the hysteroscopy, we had 102 OBGYNs plus 20 assistant professors and lecturers from the Cairo University, and another hysteroscopy one, which is basically being done. And finally, the new mixed reality laparoscopic simulator. We're now doing a study on 21st year residents. And then I have to give a quick brief about this. This was our biggest, actually, presidential contraceptive initiative. We were approached by the Ministry of Health to help teach IUD insertion because they wanted to use medicated IUDs. So we trained 1,001 physicians over the past 9 months using our very high fidelity VR IUD simulator and a hybrid course. This was actually very important because we actually trained 24 trainers in order to basically have them train those 1,001 doctors who came to us from all over the country. So where do we stand now? Well, we still are taking baby steps, but within a few months, we're going to be getting our own OBGYN ultrasound simulator with augmented reality. We're going to be getting, hopefully, within the next couple of months, high-fidelity birthing simulator together with augmented reality so that basically we can help in high-risk like shoulder dystocia, for example. Our newest VR basically has ergonomic, it allows us Trendelenburg procedures, and we have multiple trocars, very, very effective. And we're adding mixed reality. Mixed reality, of course, the fact that we can actually, as you saw using the HoloLens, do all sorts of anatomy. But more importantly, we're now doing a digitization of the 1,300 specimens at the Naguib Mahfouz Museum because we're using them for deep learning algorithms to detect pathology. So in other words, we're going into artificial intelligence together with the pathology department. And the future of surgery, we're going into that. We're trying augmented surgery for detection of ureters, augmented myomectomies, all of which can be done through proficiency-based targeted skills. HoloLens surgery, for example, allows us, because we do X-rays, CTs, etc. all day long, so why not, if these things actually appear in front of you while you're doing surgery, it's like magic. And this is actually what we did a few months ago. This is me in surgery. And basically wearing the HoloLens, I can project around the monitor the various CTs or MRIs of the multiple myomas that I'm doing via laparoscopy in this particular case. Or we can project the ureters or liver masses in GIT surgery, or we're collaborating now with Nicolas Bourdelle in France to try and do visualization of myomas during surgery through augmented reality so that we don't miss any of those. So the take-home message, the days of Halstead, see one, do one, teach one, they're over. Proficiency-based training is the way to go. Invest your time and effort into recruiting and training your trainers. And as our colleague from the UAE said this morning, basically, if we can do it, then yes, you can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Minawi. I will give the mic to Prof. Samar to announce that.
Okay, thank you so much. And again, thank you for flexibility. I just want to tell you that with a slight change in our program, we're asking you to please head to your lunch so that we don't keep you longer than this. We're having a half-hour lunch and prayer break. Lunch is served outside, so please grab your lunch and be here at 2. Okay, so 2 o'clock, we will resume the simulation session. And then let me just make an announcement just before you go. We have a very important session going to happen after lunch. I advise you not to miss it. So we are speaking simulation, finalizing simulation, but then we have a beautiful social session that you need to attend, which is the history of medicine. So, okay, so at 2 exactly, I want you in the room. 2 p.m., please be in the room. Okay, thank you so much.